The hearing will come to order. Good morning, one and all. It's good to see all of you. I apologize for being a few minutes late. We had a late startup on our simultaneous. We're having a business meeting on the Homeland Security Government Affairs Committee, and the mother of Gary Peters, our chairman, died yesterday, and we had just a moment of remembrance of her. So I apologize. But on a happier note, we're all here, and we're looking forward to getting to know you a little better, and want to welcome you to our committee today. Today I'm pleased to welcome three outstanding nominees who've been nominated for important roles at the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Commerce. Jeffrey Prieto, also known as Jeff Prieto, Jane Nishida, and Alejandra Castillo. And we welcome all of you to the EPW committee. These nominees bring with them decades of leadership experience and dedication to public service. We thank you all for agreeing to serve our country once again in critical positions to help our communities to thrive and make sure that our government works more effectively for all American people. I want to start today with the nomination for EPA General Counsel. As Chief Legal Counsel to the EPA's Administrator and as the leader of the agency's hundreds of legal professionals, the General Counsel must make sure that EPA upholds the law. That means making sure the agency is doing everything in its power to ensure the American people are getting the full protection afforded them by our country's environmental laws. It also means making sure that the rights of the people, organizations, cities, states, and tribes with whom the EPA interacts every day are respected and guaranteed. It also means seeing to it that EPA conducts its rulemakings according to the law, through a transparent process and with scientific and economic analyses that are honest and robust. The General Counsel's job is no small undertaking, and that's why I'm delighted to see the President has nominated Jeffrey Prieto for this role. Mr. Prieto has dedicated over 20 years of his distinguished career to public service. In addition to prior roles at EPA, Mr. Prieto has served at the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Justice, and most recently as General Counsel to the Department of Agriculture during the Obama administration, and worked closely with Tom Vilsack as the Secretary of Agriculture at that time. And again, as someone who's already done the same job at a different agency, I expect Mr. Prieto has a pretty good idea about the opportunities and the challenges that await him if confirmed. And I'm glad he has agreed to sign up for another round of service, a commitment to the American people shaped in part by his family's proud history of military service on behalf of our nation. Let me just say, Mr. Prieto, I was just so impressed at the service of your family in uniform, extraordinary service over the course of many years in any number of wars. I know that Ms. Prieto's dedication will be a boon to the agency and to the American people. I'm equally pleased that Jane Nishida is nominated to serve as Assistant Administrator of International and Tribal Affairs at EPA. Good morning. The office that Ms. Nishida has been nominated to lead plays a key role in helping communities, both here in the United States and across the world, to benefit from EPA's tremendous technical expertise. And she brings a wealth of state experience, a particularly helpful attribute given the predominant role of the states in executing our nation's environmental laws. She also appreciates, through her World Bank experience, the robust needs of nations across the globe for equitable economic opportunity and economic stability. Our outgoing pandemic has laid bare the unique and substantial needs of our tribal communities for economic opportunity and environmental equity, and Ms. Nishida can tap into her expertise to cement her ongoing efforts to ensure full and fair consultation with tribal nations and respect for unique tribal treaty rights. Ms. Nishida has been a highly respected leader in the Office of International and Tribal Affairs for 8 years, having served in both the Obama and the Trump administration. And when President Biden was inaugurated earlier this year, Ms. Nishida was selected from among all of the EPA's career officials to lead EPA as acting administrator until Michael Regan won confirmation. No small testimony to your abilities, Ms. Nishida. Ms. Nishida's professional record demonstrates her profound dedication to the mission of EPA and the respect she commands from leaders within both parties, and she will make an excellent assistant administrator. And finally, let me turn to the Economic Development Administration, an agency, a small agency that a lot of people, frankly, have not heard of in the past. They're hearing a lot more from about EDA today. And so I call it an agency that this year, in the middle of a pandemic, is punching above its weight. And they need a great leader, and I think in you, they're going to have it. But as we know, EDA supports economic development by providing federal funding to locally driven projects that spur growth and job creation, often serving as a lifeline for struggling communities. EDA has proven itself to be an agency, as I said earlier, that punches above its weight. And over the past several years, it operated with a roughly $300 million annual budget. But at times of disaster and hardship, EPA has stepped up to the plate, distributing billions of dollars to help American communities recover and persevere through this current crisis and other crises, from wildfires to hurricanes and now COVID-19. EDA can play and is playing a vital role in getting our economy back to full speed after the economic crisis born from the pandemic. And I'm sure that almost every member of our committee can point to an example in our respective states where EDA is helping a community in need, helping to put people to work. It has a profound impact that can reach every corner of our great nation. So I'm grateful that Alejandra Castillo stepped up to lead the agency at this critical time. Ms. Castillo is a veteran of the Commerce Department, where she served as National Director of the Minority Business Development Agency. Her leadership in that role helped secure over $19 billion in financing for minority-owned small businesses across our country, which helped create over 30,000 jobs. And we're looking forward to seeing Ms. Castillo bring that record of success to EDA. I'm confident that all three of these nominees will serve our nation well. Ms. Castillo, Ms. Prieto, Ms. Nishida, thank you for your previous service and for your work on behalf of our nations moving forward. And we look forward to hearing your testimony shortly. But first, I'm going to yield to our ranking member, Senator Capito, for any remarks that she would like to offer. Senator
Well, thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our three nominees. It's nice to have you in front of the committee. You're being nominated for positions at critical agencies, the Environmental Protection Agency and the Economic Development Administration. Each of you has dedicated the majority of your professional life to public service, and we're grateful for that. So I commend you on that. Chairman Carper and I have built upon an excellent working relationship this year. We're both very proud of the committee's work. We passed two very significant infrastructure bills this Congress by unanimous votes, 20-0. So we're proud of that. We're waiting to get the surface transportation up to the full floor. And actually, I'm on Commerce, and we're marking up that section today. Critical to our ability to do this is transparent communication. Chairman Carper and I have many frank conversations about our party's priorities or our own priorities. And through these discussions, we've been able to find common agreement and advance this significant legislation. So purpose in bringing that up is I desire and want to put before you more of that transparent communication with this administration. I know I may not agree with everything the administration does, but I would like to at least to be able to understand why and how decisions are made, and to be ensured that my constituents would have meaningful input before the decisions are made that will impact their lives. For example, Ms. Castillo, we've talked about this. There's a recent change at the Economic Development Administration. EDA plays an important role, as the chairman said, in West Virginia and across the country. The EDA works hand in hand with private partners to bolster job creation in economically distressed communities. I was disheartened that the Biden administration, when they struck two investment priorities from the application consideration process. This is when somebody's filling out, trying to get investment from the EDA, it sets the priorities and can be on a scoring system. but the administration struck critical infrastructure and opportunity zones as one of those areas that would carry weight in an application. I have fully supported EDA's common sense focus on critical infrastructure and opportunity zones. Opportunity zones are, by definition, the types of communities we ought to be investing in. And infrastructure projects such as roads, water, wastewater, and broadband are key to driving economic growth. And I don't need to tell anybody here, this is obviously a big topic in front of the Senate and has been for the White House as well. For instance, earlier this year, the EDA provided $1.75 million to the airport in Raleigh County, West Virginia, the chairman's home county. Why did I pick that? For infrastructure upgrades that will help create over 600 jobs. It's the purpose of the EDA. I struggle to understand why these priorities would be removed, especially at a time when our infrastructure needs are universally recognized. As I said, we've talked about this and probably ask a question again to get some clarification. The EDA has received record funding through the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan, $4.5 trillion above, 4.5 trillion? Billion, I was going to say. I know we talk trillions, but I think it's just billion.
You've been in those negotiations too long.
I've been in those negotiations too long. Billion above regular appropriations, but so transparency is particularly important. We need to know money's going to the communities that need it. I also have concerns about how environmental policy decisions have been made. I'll be honest with you, we're struggling to get information on high-profile decisions coming out of the administration, such as how it has developed the nationally determined contribution under the Paris Climate Agreement. Administrator Regan has said EPA conducted an analysis about how it would reach that goal. And numerous media outlets have reported on administration officials talking about analysis and modeling conducted to support this target. But so far, none of that information has been made available to Congress, to this committee, or to the American public, even after we have repeatedly asked for it. We all care about the environment and our climate. I would like to find areas where we can work together to meet these challenges. Members of this committee have a track record of finding common ground on climate issues, from carbon capture, utilization, sequestration, to nuclear, to HFCs, to diesel emission reductions. We just, as I said, we just reported our surface transportation bill that had an unprecedented climate title. However, we can only find common ground when we are open about our proposed solutions. And so far, I feel the administration, unfortunately including the EPA, has not been as transparent as it should be on climate and environmental issues. Whether it's the decision to repeal the Navigable Waters Protection Rule that was announced before any stakeholder process, or the NDC announcement, decisions seem to be made in a vacuum without significant or even public input. This worries me. I try to stay positive, as the chairman knows, I try to be real positive, but I hope it's an oversight and not intention and something that we can improve on. Mr. Prieto and Ms. Nishida, you both have very impressive management experience in the federal government. I look forward to hearing from you some of the lessons learned from your past experience and ideas for improving transparency. Thank you, Chairman, for the hearing, and I look forward to the testimony.
I would say to our witnesses, we reported out of this committee a couple of weeks ago unanimously service transportation legislation for the country, 20-0. And we're now awaiting the Commerce Committee to do their work on rail and safety. The chair, the ranking member, rather serves on both committees and leadership roles. And I know you need to be there and here. But please, given what's, I understand that some members of the committee may try to walk on our turf, on our committee's jurisdiction, so please protect our legislation and our prerogatives. Thank you so much. And then with that, I thank you very much for your statement, Senator Capito. And it's just a joy to work with you. Now, I want to recognize Senator Padilla, and who will introduce to us, formally introduce to us, Jeffrey Prieto. And Senator Padilla, please proceed. And let me just say, I understand, Ms. Prieto, that you have your wife, so it's both a son, a niño, a daughter, maybe, and two sons, rather. And we hope you'll introduce them to us. Thank you. Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the courtesy of being able to introduce Mr. Jeff Prieto, who's before us, and then I will be excusing myself to go open today's session of the Senate and then return later in the hearing.
So when you leave here, you'll go and be the president, the presiding officer, right?
Just for the moment.
And the people will refer to you, Mr. President. Pretty good promotion.
I also want to thank Ranking Member Capito for the opportunity, as I mentioned, to introduce Jeffrey Prieto from the great state of California, who is President Biden's nominee to be the General Counsel of the Environmental Protection Agency. As we know, the EPA has a critical role to play as we rise to meet the challenge of the climate crisis. The EPA is tasked with limiting air pollution, with providing safe drinking water, with protecting against toxic chemicals, and cleaning up hazardous waste sites. President Biden's ambitious climate agenda depends on the EPA's ability to hold polluters accountable and enforce strong environmental protections. Mr. Prieto is uniquely qualified to serve as General Counsel of the EPA, and I'm confident the agency will benefit from his skills and from his dedication. You know, public service is personal to him. Mr. Prieto is the grandson of two proud immigrants from Mexico, and as Mr. Chair, you recognized, he comes from a military family. He has spent nearly 20 years serving in a number of leadership positions within the federal government, working to improve the lives of communities throughout the United States. In 2015, Mr. Prieto was confirmed as General Counsel of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where he was involved in major litigation, including class action lawsuits, high-profile investigations, and a number of legislative efforts. He led the oversight of 5 divisions, 4 regional offices, 8 branch offices consisting of about 280 attorneys and legal professionals. And not only did he oversee the offices, he personally visited every single USDA office across the country. That's a lot of miles. Mr. Prieto will bring a collaborative spirit back to the EPA, one that values the legal professionals working to protect human and environmental health, so critical for EPA to properly serve its role. Prior to his USDA tenure, Mr. Prieto served in the Justice Department, the Justice Department's Environment and Natural Resources Division, and as chair of the Diversity Committee Working Group. He was tasked with implementing President Clinton's environmental justice plan, where he worked to identify and address the disproportionately high and adverse human health and environmental effects of the Justice Department's actions on minority and low-income populations and embed these principles throughout the agency. His experience leading this effort makes Mr. Prieto uniquely qualified to apply environmental justice principles to litigation that comes before the Office of the General Counsel. I'm confident that Mr. Prieto will bring to the EPA the same calm, deliberative, and thoughtful work ethic that he has shown throughout his decades of public service. His leadership is critical and timely. I strongly support Mr. Prieto's nomination and urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. Mr. Prieto, when it's time for you to testify, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to explain. Senator Ernest has a great career, career in the military and retired colonel. Senator Sullivan is a Marine colonel, and I spent a few years of my life in the Navy. So we have a number of people on this committee who very much revere military service, and your family service is just extraordinary. Just extraordinary. We have a colleague. We have a few former House members sitting up here. Former Congress. Do you know this fellow?
Absolutely.
Do you want to just introduce him? Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Hi, James.
Okay, all right. Congressman, where's your district? Where's your district?
In New York, Charlie Rangel's old district.
No kidding. All right, I served with Charlie. We both served with Charlie. Well, it's great to see you. Adriano, right? Adriano?
Yes.
Espriat, who's joined us today to introduce Alejandra Castillo. Congressman, it's great to see you. Bienvenido. Muchas gracias. Tell us a little bit about Ms. Castillo, please.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Carper and Senator Cardin, and of course, Ranking Member Capito, and members of the committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity today to introduce this fantastic nominee to the committee. As you know, President Biden has nominated Ms. Alejandra Castillo to serve as the next Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development. If confirmed, she will be the first woman of color to hold this important role. In my opinion, there's no one better fit to lead the Economic Development Administration at this critical moment. As we continue to carry out our recovery efforts, we must work hard to reverse all the disparities seen during the pandemic. America will not recover unless all of us recover. Ms. Castillo is uniquely ready for this challenge, and she brings to it not just knowledge and experience, but also heart and dedication. Like me, Ms. Castillo and her family came to New York City as immigrants from the Dominican Republic. She went to Queens, and I landed in Washington Heights. You may have seen the movie lately, In the Heights.
Are you in that movie?
I would have hoped to, but no, I was left out. We came up during a difficult time for New York City when poverty and violence plagued many parts of our city, including communities that I'm proud to represent today in Congress. We both cut our teeth working on the ground, dedicating ourselves in uplifting disenfranchised communities. Our families both represent the American dream. They came here to find opportunity, and they worked very hard to succeed. Ms. Castillo's family owned a bodega in the borough of the Bronx. There's a certain baseball team in there that you may all be familiar with, and they worked hard to give their children opportunity to succeed. Our premier public school system in New York City gave Ms. Castillo her opportunity to excel, and she went on to receive a master's and a law degree. After knowing Ms. Castillo for nearly 30 years, I can attest her career has been nothing short of remarkable. As a senior advisor in the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy during the Clinton administration, Ms. Castillo demonstrated early on her expertise in the policy and economic arena. She went on to lead the Hispanic Bar Association, where she demonstrated her commitment to empowering women and communities of colors, as well as advancing policies to uplift communities. Upon her return to government, Ms. Castillo served in various roles in the Department of Commerce, eventually becoming the National Director of Minority Business Development Agency. As the first Latina director, Ms. Castillo's strategic management increased the agency's budget. She created initiatives to promote minority-owned businesses in the STEM fields, key to ensuring equitable growth in our modernizing economy. Most recently, Ms. Castillo has been serving as the CEO of the YWCA. She is the first Latina to hold that role as well, and she has led transformative programming in pursuit of racial equality and gender equality. In her work, Ms. Castillo has met with hundreds of communities working to create economic resiliency and sustainable growth. And when the COVID-19 pandemic reached our shores, she worked hard to combat and eventually defeat it. Overall, Ms. Castillo's career has prepared her to facilitate a competitive and innovative agenda for our country. I firmly believe that Ms. Castillo's decades of leadership in economic development, gender and racial equality, and government administration, coupled with her strategic management ability to lead inclusive teams, position her as the most experienced, trusted, and capable candidate to serve as the next Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development. The Economic Development Administration, the Commerce Department, and the American people will greatly benefit from her service. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I yield back.
You've introduced a remarkable woman. In fact, that we have a remarkable trio of nominees here today. I was just saying to Senator Cardin. But thank you very much. Thanks for joining. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Nice to see you. Welcome. And let me next turn to Senator Cardin to introduce a woman. Janie tells me he's known you for 40 years. That's why, right after you were born. So,
Yeah.
Senator Cardin.
Before the congressman leaves, I served 20 years in the House. Senator Carper, former House member. 18 of those years, I was on the Ways and Means Committee with Charlie Rangel. So it's a pleasure to have you before our committee, and thank you very much for your testimony.
I'll let him know that I testify before you. I'm sure he'll have an opinion about that.
Oh, I'm sure he will. No question about it. Let me join my chairman in welcoming all three of our nominees and thanking you all for your public service. All three of you have given so much to our community, and we thank you for that. I have the personal pleasure to introduce Jane Nishida to the Environment and Public Works Committee. As Senator Carper pointed out, I've known Jane Nishida for 40 years during her extraordinary career in the environmental field. It includes both governmental and non-governmental. She's held senior management positions with responsibility for policy development and program implementation. I particularly want to thank her for her service to the people of Maryland. She has deep roots in the state of Maryland and has served in critical positions in our state, including the Maryland Secretary of the Environment, the director of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and this committee has heard me talk about the Chesapeake Bay just about at every one of our meetings. And perhaps the most important part of her experience in Maryland was her service to the Maryland House of Delegates as staff to the Environmental Matters Committee and the Economic Affairs Committee. I say that because those years that she served as counsel to the committee, I was Speaker of the Maryland House of Delegates. And it was during those years that we were developing the Chesapeake Bay program under leadership of Governor Harry Hughes. Jane Nishida played a very important part in the development of the Chesapeake Bay program. And I thank her because she really did make the governor and the legislative leadership look good during those years. So thank you very much for your help. I want you also to point out that during that time, she marshaled the successful completion of several very important bills during her service to the state of Maryland, including the Critical Areas Law. She may be talking about that. That was a major accomplishment, Mr. Chairman, to get land use adopted back in the 1980s that restricted the development of land within a certain yardage of the Bay watershed. And she helped marshal the successful adoption of that law. And then wetlands protection laws that we did. Wetlands are critically important, as you know, to our environment, and particularly to the Chesapeake Bay, as we're losing wetlands every day. And then a smart growth bill that she was also involved with later on, which connected our transportation infrastructure priorities with where we should be doing development in order to minimize the disruption of communities. All that she did and marshaled very successfully, which I think just points out the type of person she is in public service. She applied the lessons that she learned there from the Chesapeake Bay region to the rest of the world, working at the World Bank as a senior environmental institution specialist. She went on to have a senior career leader at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, as you pointed out, serving both the Obama and Trump administration and selected by President Biden to be the acting director. She is currently the Principal Deputy Assistant Administrator for the International and Tribal Affairs. In this capacity, she manages EPA's international and tribal programs, working closely with foreign and tribal governments, international and tribal organizations, and other key stakeholders. She earned her JD from Georgetown University Law Center and Bachelor of Arts degree in International Relations from Lewis and Clark College. It's really my pleasure to introduce Jane Nishida to the Environmental and Public Works Committee and encourage my colleagues to swiftly confirm her for this position.
Thank you so much, Senator Cardin. I don't know how you follow an introduction like that, so rather than recognize you, we're going to move to your left and to our right and ask Ms. Prieto if he would be our leadoff witness. I understand your wife Charlotte's here, son Daniel, son Matthew, because a couple of good biblical names. And feel free to introduce him at the beginning of your testimony, if you would, please. Welcome. We're happy you're here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do want to recognize my wife, my two sons, and also actually a member of our family, a close family friend, Ignacio Moreno, who is here also today.
Daniel, your son Daniel, is he here?
Yes.
Daniel, raise your hand, Daniel. Okay. And Matthew? All right, good to see you guys. Thanks for sharing your dad with us. And to Cheryl, thank you for sharing your husband.
So thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Capito, and other distinguished members of this committee. I thank you all for your willingness to hold this hearing. It is an honor and a privilege to appear before you as President Biden's nominee for the General Counsel of the Environmental Protection Agency. I'm humbled by the trust this nomination represents, and I'm grateful to President Biden and Administrator Regan for providing me this opportunity. Should I have the privilege of being confirmed, I look forward to continuing a career dedicated to public service. I'm also grateful for a wonderful family who has supported my endeavors. And again, my wife, Cheryl, my sons, Daniel and Matthew, are with me today. And I want to publicly thank my wife for her support, understanding, and patience throughout my career. I could not have achieved my professional and personal dreams without her. I also want to acknowledge my mother, brother, sister, uncles, aunts, cousins, nephews, and nieces in California.
Is your mom watching? Is she watching us today?
My sister set up a computer and she is watching.
Oh, that's great.
And
What's your mom's name?
my mom's name is Lucy. And
Lucy. I love Lucy. We have a Lucy on our staff.
we all
We love
do.
her. Tell your mom we said thanks for bringing you into the world and sharing you with all of us.
Thank you, Senator. And my family is central to my existence, and I'm so grateful to all of them for their prayers and love. My family has a distinguished history of military service, and members of my family and my community have sacrificed much so that I could have opportunities, and I've attempted to repay this debt by serving the public. In addition to public service and sacrifice, I learned about hard work through my grandfather, Leo Alvarez. He was employed by a lemon packing house in Santa Paula, California for more than 50 years, and it was his and my grandmother Lucia's dream that their grandchildren would be the first in our family to graduate from college. My grandparents used what they earned to benefit our family, both in the United States and Mexico, and their love and generosity changed many lives. Their daughter, and my mother, Lucy Prieto, never fulfilled her own dream of graduating from college, but she worked it so that her children could seize opportunity and fulfill the dream that my grandparents put forward. Most importantly, she never lost hope and faith in me. I am beyond proud to represent both my family and my community here today, and I believe they both exemplify the highest ideals of this nation: hard work, service, faith, sacrifice, and patriotism. If confirmed, serving as EPA General Counsel at this moment in time would be the highest honor of my career in public service. I've been privileged to serve previously as a White House Fellow, EPA Attorney Advisor, Department of Justice Environment and Natural Resources Division Trial Attorney and General Counsel, Senate-confirmed General Counsel of the Department of Agriculture, and General Counsel of the Los Angeles Community College District. My previous legal positions have prepared me to serve as the General Counsel of EPA, and my federal government experience ensures that I understand the responsibilities of the position. As I have demonstrated in my previous appointment, I will implement the laws of this nation as specified by the Constitution, expressed by Congress, and interpreted by the courts. I will provide candid legal advice and counsel to Administrator Regan and to the EPA senior executive team that is bound and guided by the rule of law. And I look forward to working once again with our respected colleagues at the Department of Justice to defend the agency's actions when challenged in the courts of law. And I'm further pleased by the opportunity to work with the incredibly talented lawyers and professional staff of the EPA Office of General Counsel. I've had the privilege to work with some of those dedicated career attorneys during my Department of Justice tenure, and now I look forward to managing and leading this extraordinary office. I have a simple management philosophy of treating colleagues as I hope to be treated, and if confirmed, I intend to work collaboratively with some of the finest attorneys and professional staff as we allow the facts, science, and the law to guide our legal analysis and judgment. Finally, I intend to serve all Americans as EPA seeks to achieve the goals of our environmental laws and the Biden-Harris administration. If confirmed, I look forward to listening closely and interacting constructively with Congress, with stakeholders, and with all members of the general public, especially with those communities that have historically not participated in matters before the Office of General Counsel. I'm committed to listening to and learning from all individuals to help me and the Office of General Counsel provide sound legal guidance to Administrator Regan and EPA clients. Should this committee honor me by recommending me, and should the Senate confirm me, I will do everything in my power to execute the duties of the General Counsel in a professional, efficient, and expeditious manner. I intend to execute my duties with the highest level of integrity, skill, and professionalism so as to earn your trust and respect. I'm committed to working with the leadership of EPA, Congress, and stakeholders to further the best interest of all Americans. And again, Senator, thank you very much for holding this hearing to consider my candidacy, and I'm grateful for your time and happy to answer the committee's questions.
Ms. Prieto, thank you for a lovely and heartfelt statement. I see your wife sitting back there. Former Senator, now President Joe Biden, has a saying. He said this to my wife and probably to Ben's, Senator Cardin's wife, Myrna, one or two times. For people who are married to folks in service like we are, to the spouses, President Biden will say, for you, no purgatory, straight to heaven. So thank you so much for putting up with this guy and sharing him with the rest of us. All right, thank you. Next, I think we're going to hear from Alejandra Castillo. And with Ms. Castillo, I'm going to ask you to please proceed. I'm just glad I don't have to follow that opening testimony, but I know you can.
Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito, distinguished members of the committee, I am honored to come before you today as President Biden's nominee for Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development. Thank you for the time that you and your staff afforded me to meet with you during this past week. It was engaging and informative. I share your goals of promoting economic development and growth while also seeking to strengthen our nation's economic innovation and global competitiveness. I would also like to thank Congressman Espaillat for that kind introduction. Several members of my family have joined me today, and I'm so glad they're here. My mother and late father are the source of my values towards public service, hard work, and love of country. I would also like to acknowledge my brothers, nieces, and nephews who challenge me and teach me the meaning of family, understanding, and patience. The mission of the Economic Development Administration...
Before you do, your mom's here, right?
My mother's here.
Would you raise your hand, ma'am?
Yes,
Oh, that's
right
very
there.
nice. And the woman who's back there, beaming with pride, sitting in the front row, named Susanna, right?
Susanna,
It's
yes.
very nice to see you, ma'am.
Yes.
And do you have a couple of nieces here and a nephew?
Yes, my niece Alejandra and my niece Catherine and my nephew Matthew.
Another Matthew.
Another Matthew.
Can't have too many of those. Welcome.
I would also like to, the mission of the Economic Development Administration, EDA, is to support distressed communities in building resilient economies. And when strong economic ecosystems are devastated by natural disaster or even a pandemic, EDA is there to support community-led efforts to rebuild. EDA helps Americans recover from economic challenges and makes critical investments to spur innovation and create economic opportunities for all. Today, I come before you with a perspective of economic development that has been shaped not only by my personal background, but also by my professional experience that spans over 2 decades of work in the public, private, and nonprofit sector. I consider myself an embodiment of the American dream. Growing up, I watched my parents, who immigrated from the Dominican Republic, journey from working as janitors to opening small businesses to support our family. Experiencing New York City in the 1970s, the scarcity of jobs, the lack of economic vitality, and the quasi-bankruptcy the city was experiencing gave me a unique perspective into how economic disinvestments can devastate a community. As a girl, I often rose at 4 a.m. to help my father run his bodega in the Bronx. I refined my math skills by calculating taxes for my mother's Avon sales. My father took his own life when I was 13. During the devastating global economic crisis of the 1980s, I saw his struggles. I know that business owners often walk a thin line between success and failure. And I know nothing more devastating to an entrepreneur than when their life dreams fall apart. In economic development, every challenge is truly an opportunity. As we work through this pandemic, we are at a unique juncture with the chance to make critical investments in infrastructure, support tomorrow's industries, and prepare our citizens for the workforce of the future. We have the opportunity to put Americans back to work and increase our global competitiveness. Our economy must be inclusive and generate growth in communities large and small, develop strategies that have social and economic impact, and weave together communities across the country, whether they be urban, suburban, or rural. Throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to work with diverse communities across the country, from McAllen, Texas to Rockford, Illinois, and Wheeling, West Virginia to Wenatchee, Washington, and so many others. Supporting these communities has never been more important, and if confirmed, I will be rolling up my sleeves as we rebuild our economy. If confirmed, I will be, in a sense, returning home. The Department of Commerce is where I have spent the bulk of my time in government. In 2014, former President Obama tapped me to lead the Minority Business Development Agency, MBDA, an appointment close to my heart given my own family's background in small business. While I was at the MBDA, we cut overhead and moved more of the budget into directly supporting minority business owners with resources such as grants and technical assistance funding. I also served as the special advisor to the Undersecretary for International Trade Administration, where I assisted in the development of policy initiatives geared toward promoting American businesses and industries across the globe. It would be a great honor to continue my public service and utilize all that I have learned and experienced in the legislative, policy, and programmatic arena, as well as my ability to lead large organizations towards transformational change and impact. If confirmed, it is my understanding that I will also be the first woman of color to hold this position. That, too, would be an immense honor. This role demands nothing short of excellence, accountability, and measurable outcomes in its execution. I commit to working with all of you and the dedicated and committed career civil servants at EDA to earn the confidence of the American people. Thank you again for the opportunity to address you today. I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much. That was another terrific statement. And sometimes when I would say to our witnesses, when people are nominated and come before our committee and I have a chance to talk to them privately, personally, I always ask them to talk about their parents and the values that they learned from growing up. And each of you have just told extraordinary stories. So you picked the right parents. We have one more to go, and that's Jane Nishida. And you're welcome to make your opening statement. And I understand there might be a niece named Megan out there somewhere that she has her hand up. Megan, how are you? Sometimes, every now and then, Megan, I notice it's a relative, could be a spouse or whatever, a niece. I notice that their lips are moving when the nominee speaks. So I'm going to watch you carefully to see if she's taking her cues from you. All right, we're glad you're here. I know you're proud of your aunt. Go ahead, Jane.
Thank you, Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito.
Make sure your mic's on, please. We want to hear every word.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito, and members of the committee. I'm humbled to appear today as President Biden's nominee to be the Assistant Administrator for International and Tribal Affairs for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I want to first acknowledge my family who are joining remotely from Portland and Seattle, and as you just pointed out, my beloved niece, Megan, who is here in person to support me. So thank you, Megan.
Who are some of the folks that are joining us remotely from Portland, West Coast?
My brother Robert and his family, and my brother Charles in Seattle and his family.
That's great. Welcome to both of them.
Thank you. I know my parents are also with me in spirit, especially my father, who served in the U.S. Army and also in the U.S. government for over 30 years, and who instilled in me the importance of public service. I also want to give a special thanks to Senator Cardin for your kind and generous words in introducing me here today. As Senator Cardin pointed out, we've known each other 40 years, so just when we were very young. And I had, as Senator Cardin pointed out, had the pleasure of working under his leadership when he was the Speaker of the Maryland House of Delegates. So thank you, Senator Cardin.
I understand he spoke at your elementary school, and that's when you first
Right,
met
exactly. That's when we first met in elementary school. For over 30 years, I have worked in the environmental field. And I think Senator Cardin has just pointed it's actually been over 40 years I have worked in the environmental field, working in both the federal and state government and in international and non-governmental organizations. It has been my privilege to spend the last 10 years at EPA working alongside the incredible staff at EPA who have dedicated their careers to furthering the agency's mission to protect public health and the environment. I spent the first 20 years of my career in the state of Maryland, including 7 years as the Maryland Secretary in the Environment. And as Senator Cardin pointed out, one of my greatest accomplishments in Maryland was working with him to enact the landmark critical areas law to protect the Chesapeake Bay. And in that legislation, I worked closely with diverse stewards of our environment, the farmers, the fisher folks, the local governments, the NGOs, and the citizens of Maryland. And I saw firsthand the interconnections between agriculture and resource protection, between economic development and the environment. In 2011, I joined EPA first as the director of the Regional and Bilateral Affairs Office within the Office of International and Tribal Affairs. And then in 2013, I was promoted to the Principal Deputy Assistant Administrator, the office that I currently hold. Taking on this second role has given me the opportunity to serve the 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States and to visit Indian country. It has been an inspiring experience for me. It has allowed me to be able to see firsthand the amazing resilience of the Santa Clara Pueblo from what they had to go through in a devastating wildfire in 2011. And since Senator Inhofe has now joined us, I also was able to visit the Quapaw tribe's impressive cleanup of the Superfund site, the Tar Creek Superfund site. It was truly amazing. And I also visited the Swinomish tribe and saw all the important water quality works and programs that they are doing there. It motivated me to strengthen EPA's tribal consultation policy, and I am proud that EPA was the first federal agency to incorporate the consideration of treaty rights and resources. Globally, foreign nations are facing similar challenges as our tribal nations. These are challenges of extreme weather events, climate change, water quality, environmental cleanups, and environmental justice. The United States and EPA has a long history of providing environmental leadership in our bilateral relationships with countries and in multilateral forums. By sharing our regional and local best practices and sharing our scientific expertise in private sector innovations, much of the world has come to view EPA as a gold standard of environmental protection. And my office has helped by promoting regional cooperation in Asia to improve air quality and has provided technical assistance in Central America to improve environmental governance. More recently, my office is focused on the global challenge of marine litter, collaborating with other federal agencies, the private sector, and NGO partners to promote policies and practices to reduce marine litter. Should I be confirmed, I look forward to continuing to advance EPA's leadership and mission with both our tribal partners in Indian country and with our international partners around the world. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Ms. Nishida, thank you for that statement. And we'll now begin with some questions for our witnesses. I think Senator Cardin and I sit side by side on the Finance Committee and side by side on this committee. He probably gets tired of seeing me, but it's a joy to serve with him. And Senator Inhofe and I served together in the House a million years ago, and now we get to work here. He's a former chairman of this committee and of the Armed Services Committee. So, I never got tired of seeing you. I was waiting to say that. There's probably a day or two that you did, but you're nice to let those fade away. Anyway, I need to run over to the Finance Committee for a few minutes. Senator Cardin is going to hold the gavel, and I'll be back as quickly as I can and rejoin the questioning. I leave you in very good hands. I'll look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you. Senator?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me again thank all three of our nominees. Your background and record and commitment to public service is very, very impressive. We have a lot going on today. Secretary Yellen is before the Senate Finance Committee, so that's where Senator Carper is going to ask some questions. I'll be joining him in a little bit. The Commerce Committee is marking up a major part of the infrastructure bill this morning. So there's a lot of things going on, and so recognize that there'll be some distractions here in our committee, but we wanted to advance your nominations as quickly as possible with hearings. So, Mr. Prieto, I want to start with you, if I might. I appreciated our opportunity yesterday to have a conversation about enforcement issues, but with Jane Nishida here, I'm going to ask you a question about the Chesapeake Bay. And that is, we've worked long and hard on the Chesapeake Bay program. It was built from the local government up, with state and local governments coming together with stakeholders, including the agricultural community, the development community, local governments, in an effort in which we all agreed that we had to do best science to save the Chesapeake Bay a national treasure. That it was really in an extremely dangerous situation, considering the historic loss of oysters, the amount of development in the watershed. So we took dramatic actions at the local levels with the support of all of our stakeholders, the business community, labor community, the farming community, joined with 6 other states in the district, formed the Chesapeake Bay Alliance, and came to the federal government, and the federal government joined us. And they are basically the enforcement arm to make sure we do what we say we will do under the Bay agreements and enforce through TMDLs. I say that because recently litigation was filed with concern as to whether the state of Pennsylvania was living up to their commitments and whether EPA, in fact, was doing what it's responsible to do in enforcing the agreement. In a way, it was a friendly lawsuit. The state of Maryland has joined it. And my question to you is that you're going to play a critical role to make sure that we move forward with the commitments under the Chesapeake Bay program, using best science and respecting local priorities in meeting those targets. And I would just ask whether your view as to how you can accommodate the advancement of the Chesapeake Bay program initiatives and preserve this national treasure.
Senator, thank you very much for that question. And again, thank you for your graciousness yesterday and spending some time with me. And again, I want to recognize your leadership, obviously, in this area. And during my federal service, I'm a longtime resident of Maryland, and I recognize the work, and as well as my colleague, Ms. Nishida, in this very, very important matter. Senator, if confirmed, I can tell you, and again, you've mentioned litigation, that I will be fully briefed. I know that this is a priority, and I look very much to getting a briefing in terms of the status of the litigation. Again, I also look forward to working with the very, very talented career staff at the Office of Water. The concepts of TMDLs and the MPDS program is something that I'm familiar with, and I look forward to working with them and to being briefed and to work towards a resolution of this litigation. But again, thank you, Senator, for your leadership, and I very much look forward to working on this issue if confirmed.
So if confirmed, do you commit, though, to work with members of this committee and keep us engaged and informed as this process moves forward?
Senator, absolutely. And again, I absolutely respect the relationship, the bipartisan nature of this committee, and I look forward, again, and this is in my opening statement, to work closely with this committee on all of these important issues.
Ms. Castillo, I appreciated our conversation. EDA plays a critically important role. So I was listening to Senator Capito talk about one of her concerns about a particular project. So we talked about one of our requests, which happened to be in Annapolis, dealing with tourism, which was part of the focus of the COVID relief funds that were made available to EDA. My question, and I'm very pleased by our conversation, EDA can play a critically important role in communities that we have challenges in employment, where we have to deal with providing opportunity so that communities can survive. I think about broadband, where EDA has played a critical part in the last mile connections in broadband in rural areas and underserved communities. I guess if you could just share with us your view as to how EDA can aggressively help us reach underserved communities with economic opportunity.
So Senator Cardin, thank you for the question. And as I said in my opening statement, in many ways, this is a personal issue for me because I grew up in these type of distressed communities and disenfranchised communities. And I also say that in my professional journey, I've worked very closely on the ground with different communities. EDA's mission, a mission that is truly critical, as you well pointed out at this moment in time, is to provide assistance, to provide planning funding and opportunities, to look at the whole spectrum of issues that impact, but also to leverage the tools that EDA has at its capacity. I'll also tell you that, as you spoke about broadband, President Biden has made a commitment to bring broadband to all. But I would also say that my experience at Commerce is to also leverage the other different agencies, for example, like NTIA, for which broadband is a true core. So I would say to you, Senator Cardin, that if confirmed, my goal at EDA is to make sure that we are leveraging all of our resources, that we are reaching out to communities, to go and, as I mentioned to you, to go and travel, to make sure that we are not only inside the Beltway, but that we are reaching communities large and small in a number of different ways.
Thank you very much. Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Senator Loomis has made a request to go ahead of me. If that's the case, sure, it's fine with me.
Senator Loomis is available by WebEx. Senator Loomis, you may proceed.
Thank you, Senator Cardin, and thank you, Senator Inhofe, for giving me the opportunity to precede you here. My first question is for Mr. Prieto, and I'd like to talk about regional haze. Wyoming has a long history of regulating its air quality, and that means we have a long history of working with the EPA. Wyoming's Department of Environmental Quality, the regional office of EPA, our AG's office, the governor's office, and Pacific Corps worked on 2 regional haze agreements that have been the subject of years of negotiation and litigation. The 2 power plants involved are the Wyodak plant near Gillette and the Jim Bridger plant near Rock Springs. Last year, agreement was reached with all these parties. In summary, the EPA agreed to use the state implementation plan with some EPA required revisions for both plants. These were really remarkable achievements and recognize the importance of state-directed and managed enforcement decisions under state primacy. The result is that the regional haze guidelines were met, and met with the agreement of the parties, including EPA, under the state implementation plans and not the top-down federal plans. So just last week, Wyoming was informed that the Jim Bridger agreement would not be sent to the Federal Register to complete the process. Now, again, this agreement was the result of negotiations and met every EPA request and requirement. That decision appears contrary to Administrator Regan's earlier statements recognizing the proper role of states. So, Mr. Prieto, should you be confirmed as general counsel, will you review the Jim Bridger decision and commit to review both the Jim Bridger and Wyodak settlement agreements, that if the regional haze goals are met, the state implementation plans should be honored?
Senator, thank you very much for that question. And again, Senator, I also recognize the importance of not only SIPs in terms of the working relationship that we have with our state partners, but in general, the working relationship that EPA does have with its state partners. And Senator, I can tell you, in having experience in working with state partners in my various roles, it's a relationship that I believe is very, very important, and something that I know that Administrator Regan has committed to, and that I would commit also to provide the legal counsel to support those efforts. If confirmed, Senator, and again, as you know, I'm not part of the administration at this point. I would very much like to be briefed on this particular matter, so that I can review what the situation is. And I can commit to you, Senator, that I will be briefed, that I will make myself familiar with this particular situation, and again, recognizing the important relationship that EPA does have with its state partners.
Thanks very much, Mr. Prieto. As you can see, this is a really important topic for my state, especially after all the years of negotiation that has occurred among all of the parties. I have another question. Of course, you're not going to be surprised about this question. I'm really concerned about the EPA's announced plans to scrap the Navigable Waters Protection Rule. Now, you previously served as general counsel at USDA, which manages 193 million acres in the U.S. So given that experience, in your view, where does federal jurisdiction of waters end?
And thank you, Senator, very much for that question, and absolutely happy to answer. Senator, as you know, that the Clean Water Act does give the federal government the authority to determine which waters should be protected and which waters should not be protected from a federal standpoint. And I also absolutely appreciate your acknowledgement of my experience in the government as well as serving at USDA. And I understand the balanced approach that's necessary on many of these issues. I can say again, and I support Administrator Regan and the Office of Water's approach, that they will be looking at the past examples and will learn from those, and that there will be very broad stakeholder outreach, not only to our state partners, our tribal partners, but also to the other interested entities. And I very much look forward, Senator, to working with the Administrator and the Office of Water to engage in that particular support, to provide that legal counsel and that legal support. And again, in acknowledgement, Senator, that there are many regulated entities that should be part of that approach. I know the Administrator has already committed to doing so, and I very much look forward, if confirmed, to support his efforts in seeking that broad stakeholder approach as we find the balance necessary and we move forward and we follow, again, the science and the law in coming up with the appropriate way to regulate the waters of the United States.
Well, thank you, Mr. Prieto. My time has expired. Senator Inhofe, thanks for letting me go ahead, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. We'll now go to Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that very much. And let me just kind of build on a little bit what Senator Loomis was talking about, because that's one of the major things I wanted to bring up and talk about. We have, a lot of us had serious concerns with the administration's recent announcement that it will repeal and replace the Trump-era navigable waters protection rule. Now, I don't think I heard you say that in those words. What would your position be on that?
Senator, again, I've not had the opportunity to review that announcement, but I do know that the Administrator has indicated, and again, through the Office of Water, that as they move forward in this particular area, that they are going to engage in that very broad stakeholder approach. And I think that it's important to state that, as I've mentioned to Senator Loomis as well, is that there needs to be that opportunity as another rulemaking process, if in fact that does take place, to ensure that all of the regulated communities are going to have the opportunity to speak to this.
Okay, and I appreciate that. Let me kind of hurry on it a little bit, because you're familiar with the statement that was made, this specific and significant environmental harm or implementation challenges of the Trump rule. I heard the statement made by more than one, and yet no one was specific as to what that specific and significant environmental harm comprised of. Can you help me with that?
And Senator, what I would say in terms of that statement, I'm not part of the administration. I can commit to you, Senator, though, that if confirmed, that I will look very closely and support Administrator Regan and the Office of Water as they move forward in that process. I was not involved in making that particular statement. But I do think, Senator, and I think this is, again, very important, I think it is the interest of Administrator Regan to go through a process that will ultimately end up with a durable rule, a rule that brings certainty. And I think that is something that all of the regulated communities, as well as this committee, is looking forward to. And I'm committed to that process with the ultimate goal of reaching that particular solution.
And I appreciate that, but let me just ask you, are you familiar with any specific and significant environmental harm?
And Senator, again, not having crafted that particular language and not having looked at that, I would not comment on that particular statement, but I do look forward, if confirmed, to be
Either
briefed
you
on that.
are or not familiar with,
Yeah.
are you familiar with any of that level of harm?
I'm not familiar with any levels of harm. I don't know what that statement
Oh,
is referring to in terms of specific, Senator.
That's very good. Ms. Nishida, first of all, your comments, the fact that you are interested in the problems that we have had and successes, that success with the Quapaws was one that I was right in the middle of for a period of about 8 years, so I'm very familiar with that, and that was successful. Now, in May, I sent a letter to the President regarding the administration's lack of transparency in developing its new Paris Climate Nationally Determined Contribution Emissions Pledge. And I've not received any response back from that. And now, assuming that you are confirmed, which I believe you will be, would you see to it that I do get a response to that request that I made some time ago?
Thank you, Senator, for your question with regards to the Paris Agreement. The President Biden has made addressing the climate crisis a priority for the entire administration. So my office will be working with the other offices within EPA and with our colleagues in the State Department and the White House to take a whole government approach to addressing the climate change, including the NDC commitments that we have under the Paris Agreement. So
I hate to interrupt you, but this question is very specific, and that is, would you see to it that I get a response to the letter and request that I made? I don't have the date of this, but it's been some time now. Just getting a response.
Senator, I'm not familiar with your letter, but I will certainly work with the appropriate officials in the U.S. government.
And then would you let me know either way once you do that?
Senator, I will, as I mentioned, I will work with the appropriate officials to let them know of your concern with regards to your
Good.
letter.
I would appreciate that very much. And Ms. Castillo, I thank you. I know I abused your time by going into a lot of the detail, but I'm so familiar with what you folks do, and I'm so impressed by it. And I will look forward to working with you on probably more of a regular basis than you would really want right now.
I welcome it, Senator. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Nishida, good to have the opportunity to speak with you again. As we discussed on our call, we need EPA's full commitment to prioritize the cleanup of over 500 abandoned uranium mines across the Navajo Nation. These mines threaten groundwater supplies used by tribal members. And folks who live on the Navajo Nation have a documented higher rate of uranium-related health issues than folks who don't. Arizona needs a strong advocate in you and Administrator Regan to accelerate existing plans to clean up these mines. Would you agree that the President's executive order on environmental justice makes the Navajo project a top priority for the EPA?
Thank you, Senator, for your question, and thank you for the time to meet with me earlier. As you point out, the Navajo Nation is facing serious problems. It is not right that the parents of Navajo children are fearful about whether or not their groundwater is contaminated, or whether their children, when they're out playing, whether they may be playing near an abandoned uranium mine. So I do agree with you that this is a top priority for EPA. Administrator Regan also believes this. That is why we have taken aggressive enforcement actions and have now had $1.7 billion in settlements. That settlement money will go to help address the cleanup of many of the uranium sites. In addition to the settlement money, we are pursuing other avenues as well. We are working with other federal agencies like the Department of Energy, USDA, and Interior, because we know that the legacy in terms of uranium and mines is going to require additional resources.
So the settlement, the $1.7 billion, that still doesn't sound like enough to clean up all the mines over the next 10 years. Is that correct?
Unfortunately not, Senator. So the $1.7 billion, the EPA just completed a 10-year cleanup plan. Under the cleanup plan, we will be hiring new project remedial officers. We will also be issuing contracts, some of which to members of the Navajo Nation. And in addition, we are building the capacity of the Navajo Nation to address the cleanup themselves. However, this is not going to be able to address all the sites. It's only going to partially fund it, and that's why we are working with other federal agencies, and we are pursuing other settlement actions so that we can have more resources to address this serious problem.
Do you have an estimate for what the total cost to clean up all 500 abandoned uranium mines would be?
No, unfortunately, we do not have an estimate at this time.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Castillo, thank you for joining us today. As you know, the American Rescue Plan Act provided EDA $3 billion for economic development assistance awards, including a new program which I supported that provides dedicated funds for hard-hit industries like recreation and tourism. It's important that as EDA prepares to disperse these funds, they're done in an equitable way throughout the country and within Arizona. Yet in recent months, I've heard from many Arizona stakeholders who felt left behind as EDA was distributing CARES Act funding. And after looking at the number of grants funded in Arizona last year as compared to other states, it's clear that more must be done to meet the outstanding needs of Arizona communities. Ms. Castillo, as EDA prepares to distribute ARPA funds, how important do you believe outreach and quality technical assistance programs will be to ensuring that these funds have a long-term impact on hard-hit communities?
Thank you, Senator Kelly. I greatly appreciate the question. I will tell you that in my opening statement, as well as just my commitment overall, I strongly believe that EDA funding must go to communities overall, all around the country. I recognize your concern. I hope to work very closely with you and your team as we look in terms of the deployment of these funds, but more importantly, making sure that we engage, we communicate, and we have a transparent process to provide technical assistance and support and making sure that those grants are successful. So if confirmed, I look forward to working with you. I have visited numerous times Arizona, and I would like to support you in any way possible.
Thank you, Ms. Castillo, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Markey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Castillo, as you know from your experience in minority entrepreneurship and economic development, it does take more than a new bridge to close the economic gap found in our disadvantaged communities. Environmental justice communities need large-scale investments in climate infrastructure to lighten their pollution burdens. But if communities aren't ready to take on those major projects, those projects may never take place. So I'm working on new legislation that would leverage the Economic Development Administration's expertise and existing grants to support disadvantaged communities in identifying and planning out climate infrastructure projects. Ms. Castillo, if confirmed, will you commit to working with me on this key priority to ensure that our communities have the resources they need to take the first steps in developing climate projects?
Senator Markey, thank you for the question, and I truly enjoyed our conversation the other day. And indeed, if confirmed, I will very much commit to working closely with all the members of Congress, because I strongly believe that in essence, we must be able to be accountable and to provide as much assistance, whether it's technical assistance, planning assistance, an array of resources that EDA has at its disposal, but also leveraging, as I mentioned before, the breadth and scope of the Department of Commerce to make sure that we're working in collaboration across Commerce, but also across the federal government to make sure that disenfranchised and communities are reached and appropriately funded.
So you will work with me on this priority?
It would be an honor to, sir.
Okay, beautiful, thank you. And I recently introduced the Environmental Justice Mapping and Data Collection Act with Senator Duckworth and Representative Cori Bush from Missouri. That legislation would identify inequities between communities and would help ensure that at least 40% of federal investment benefits flow to disadvantaged communities, as stated in President Biden's Justice 40 agenda. Ms. Castillo, as Assistant Secretary, will you support efforts to target investments and track progress in disadvantaged communities?
Senator, I will say that the data is critical. I am a huge proponent of making sure that we leverage data to make the best decisions possible. If confirmed, I very much welcome the opportunity to work with you and to continue to make sure that those dollars and funds are reaching disenfranchised communities in new and different ways to make sure that economic development is realized.
Thank you. It's a very high priority that Senator Duckworth and I have on this committee, that be the ultimate outcome of the new investments which we're going to be making. Unfortunately, sea levels aren't the only thing rising on our oceans. Emissions from international maritime shipping have risen by 10% in the last 10 years. And right when we need to be cutting our emissions the most, the trend may only be getting worse. According to the International Maritime Organization, shipping emissions could increase by as much as 30% by the year 2050. And that's why in April I reintroduced my legislation calling for the Expanding META Act, which would fund research and activities related to zero-emission technologies from ports and vessels. We need strong international agreements on shipping emissions, but industry interests in certain countries have reportedly blocked the progress that we need. The United States has the opportunity to lead on these discussions through the Environmental Protection Agency's Office of International and Tribal Affairs. Ms. Nishida, if confirmed, will you work to support the shipping industry in taking steps to reduce its role in the climate crisis?
Thank you, Senator, for this question. My office and EPA has been working with the maritime industry. We have also been working with the International Maritime Organization to address the pollution, the emissions that you just rightly point out are coming from the shipping industry. We are also working with ports around the world as well. So while I'm not familiar with a particular piece of legislation that you just identified, I look forward to working with you and your office.
Okay, thank you. Well, you know, the International Maritime Organization delegates range from oil companies to shipping magnates. The perpetrators of the climate crisis are staying in power and not paying for pollution. So, Ms. Nishida, if confirmed, will the EPA act as a counterbalance to any interests that are watering down our maritime shipping ambitions?
Senator, we work with diverse stakeholders. We work with the shipping industry, but we also work with NGOs, and we have worked very collaboratively with a number of stakeholders on the important issues, not only of shipping in terms of emissions, but in terms of oceans in general. And we will continue to do that to ensure that there is a balance at the IMO in terms of addressing this issue.
Yeah, no, I thank you. I think in a lot of ways it's not balanced. We need a counterbalance now because it's been so disproportionately skewed towards those vested interests that really have an economic stake in not reducing pollution. So thank you all so much. Thank you all for your service. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Markey. I think I hear Senator Carper coming back. Maybe not. Yes, how do I know that? I'll turn it back over to Senator Carper.
Senator Cardin, thank you very, very much. I understand there's no other, let me ask our staff, no one else in line to ask questions? Okay. As you may know, there are three standard questions we ask of our witnesses. And it's on one of my other committees, Homeland Security, we ask the witnesses to stand and take an oath, to be truthful. You look trustworthy, and so we won't do that. Actually, that's not the tradition of this committee. We just ask the questions. And let me just ask a question and I'll ask you to start with Ms. Castillo. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear before this committee or designated members of this committee and other appropriate committees of the Congress and provide information subject to appropriate and necessary security protections with respect to your responsibilities? Do you?
I do. I do affirm, Senator.
Thank you. Jane?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do, Senator.
Thanks very much. Second question. We'll start again with you, Ms. Castillo. Do you agree to ensure that testimony, briefings, documents, and electronic and other forms of communication of information are provided to this committee and its staff and other committees and other appropriate committees in a timely manner?
I agree, yes.
Thank you, Jane.
Yes, I agree.
Mr. Prieto?
Yes, I do, Senator.
Thank you, Warren. You're 2 for 2. One more. Do you know of any matters which you may or may not have disclosed that might place you in a conflict of interest if you were confirmed?
I don't know of any matters.
All right.
No, I do not.
Ms. Prieto?
No, I do not, Senator.
Good. All right. Mr. Sullivan, Colonel. How are you, my friend?
Thank you.
Marine Colonel right here. Extraordinary service.
Thank you, Captain.
And would you like to get situated? I'm willing to just turn right to you if you want
Great.
to lead us off, if that helps. We have of our 3 witnesses. I don't know if you, Mr. Prieto, his family has just extraordinary record of service, military service.
Oh,
Just
great.
extraordinary.
Good.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, you're
Thank you.
recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the nominees for your desire to serve our country, continuing to do that. That's really important. I want to get a commitment from all of you first. Have you been to Alaska before?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, and can I get a commitment for you guys to come up and meet with my constituents on a lot of these issues?
Absolutely, Senator.
Nishida?
Yes, I would be honored to return to Alaska.
Great.
I would be honored, and my mother, who's here, loves Alaska.
Good, I'm glad she loves Alaska. So do I. Well, let me talk about a couple issues. You know, we get a little bit, I'll just be very frank, you know, the EPA is not always viewed as helpful in my state. We care about our environment. We care about our wildlife probably more than anybody, but we also care about jobs and economic opportunity, and it's an important balance. And sometimes, actually a lot of times, we don't think the EPA cares about the jobs and economic opportunity things, which really matter to, you know, all working families in America. So let me ask, can I get you to get a commitment from all 3 of you to balance that and not make it so focused? Again, the EPA, a lot of times in my state, doesn't have a great reputation, viewed very heavy-handed, very anti-jobs, very anti-economic opportunity. Can I get a commitment from all of you to remember to balance that, particularly when you're looking at issues in Alaska? A simple yes would do.
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
I'm sorry, Senator. Yes, Senator, I would follow again. Administrator Regan is committed to that type of balance, and I, again, would support.
Good. I've talked to him ad nauseum about the issue. So, Ms. Nishida, let me go into a little bit of issues with you. You know, I've talked to Administrator Reagan a lot about this issue of environmental justice for minority communities. You know, we have a very large Alaska Native population. It's almost 20% of the population in my state. Great Americans, patriotic Americans. Alaska Natives serve at higher rates in the military than any other ethnic group in the country. But a lot of times the issues, again, that the EPA comes down on, we view it as kind of anti-jobs, anti-economic opportunity. So with regard to tribal matters, can I get your commitment to really focus on what the community cares about? Let me give you an example. We had this project, an energy project called the Willow Project. That fortunately the Biden administration, they put it on hold, but now they're going to support. It was, but of course the issue of ANWR, which in my state is strongly supported by pretty much everybody. Yeah, there's some fringe groups that don't. All the Democrats, all the Republicans, the vast majority of the Native people support it. They're not against it because it's jobs, it's opportunity. Can I get your commitment to really look at what the leaders of our Native communities want in terms of these kind of issues? Because a lot of times in the national press, they get it wrong. Can I get your commitment to look hard at that?
Senator, as I indicated, I've had the great fortune to visit your state on a number of occasions.
And I know you've worked hard on the transboundary mining issues, and I appreciate that.
And I have had the opportunity in those visits to meet with tribal leaders in your state. So I understand the difficult circumstances that Alaska Native villages have. And I have worked through my office, through the Indian General Assistance Program, to provide resources so that Alaskan Native villages can have the environmental programs and services that they so need. So I will continue to work closely with the Alaskan Native villages and with your office to ensure that we provide the services that your state needs.
Great. Let me raise one more issue, Mr. Chairman, if I may, and it's an issue that the chairman and I have worked on, and it's a little bit more detailed, but it's something that there was good bipartisan progress on, and I want to get your commitment to continue it. So Congress in 1971 passed the Alaska Native Land Claims Settlement Act. What we call ANCSA, the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, and that provided 44 million acres of land to our Alaska Native communities in fee simple, and the largest land settlement for Native peoples anywhere in the world. I still think it is. Very innovative. Again, Congress passed that. Unfortunately, a lot of that land that was transferred to the Native people was contaminated, already contaminated. Now, we fixed a couple years ago, again, thanks to the chairman's help, this issue of CERCLA liability. Believe it or not, the federal government said to the Native people of Alaska, here's your 44 million acres of land. A lot of it's contaminated. Now you're on the hook from a liability perspective to clean it up. Well, that was obviously ridiculous, and we fixed that finally in federal law here. But there's been some very innovative approaches to try to clean that land up. It's the federal government's responsibility. You can't give people land that's polluted and say, you fix it. So can you work with me? There were some good ideas with the EPA during the Trump administration, bipartisan, innovative ideas on how do we clean up the contaminated lands the feds gave the Native people in Alaska unfair, and how do we work that? Can I get your commitment to work with me and this committee and the Native people in Alaska on innovative ways to clean up the land that they were given in terms of a settlement with their federal government, and it ended up all being polluted, contaminated, not all, but a lot of it. Can I get your commitment to work with us and this committee on that issue?
Senator, the short answer is yes. You were not here for my response to Senator Kelly with regards to work that EPA is doing in the Navajo Nation. We understand that we honor our government-to-government and our nation-to-nation relationship with sovereign nations. And part of that responsibility is to work with tribal nations to address contaminated sites on their tribal lands and how it affects their tribal resources. So the short answer is yes, Senator.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today and for your responses to Senator Sullivan's questions. Question, if I could, for Mr. Prieto. Mr. Prieto, as you know, during the last couple of administrations, EPA has issued a number of high-profile rulemakings that have been overturned by the courts. The most recent example was the climate rule for power plants, known as the Affordable Clean Energy, or ACE rule, and issued by the Trump administration. It was thrown out by, as you know, by the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals at the beginning of this year. Not only was this a I'm tempted to say terrible rule, but I said I'll just say not a very thoughtful rule. How's that? Not a thoughtful rule, and one of what has contributed greatly to climate change, something we're working hard to address. But also, the court found that the EPA's rulemaking process was at fault. My question for you would be, what are the lessons that you have learned, that we should learn maybe, from seeing the judiciary vacate EPA's rules, like the Trump ACE rule? How will you help EPA improve its rulemaking process to make sure that new rules withstand judicial scrutiny? Two-part question.
No, thank you very much for that answer, Senator. And
I know you're going to give the answer. I just asked the question. So.
Well, thank you very much for that question, Senator. And again, as you know, the Office of General Counsel does have lead responsibility in terms of APA review, the Administrative Procedures Act, and it's something that is incredibly important from a process standpoint. And Senator, you're absolutely correct that many times actions are dealt with the court because the APA has not been followed correctly. It's an important rule. It's an important rule relative to the aspect of giving the public notice. It's also an important rule in terms of allowing the public to participate. And it's also an important rule in terms of how that process actually takes place. And I think lessons learned, and I won't say in terms of EPA, but in terms of my experience, both at the Department of Justice and at USDA, is that I can assure you, Senator, that if confirmed, that my counsel will be, again, to follow the law as it relates to the APA, to ensure that if the court is reviewing this from a procedural standpoint, that the agency has followed it diligently, and to leave those issues to be resolved in another manner.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Prieto. A question, if I could, for Ms. Nishida. And as you know, the tribal consultation is one of the most important tenets of the tribal-federal relationship. Tribes and tribal advocates have often indicated that some federal agencies treat tribal consultation as a box-checking exercise. My question would be, how would you propose to work to ensure that the EPA commits to true and meaningful tribal consultation?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. As you just pointed out, tribal consultation is, in fact, the cornerstone of our nation-to-nation relationship with our tribal partners. So President Biden, one of the first acts that he took was to direct all federal agencies to review our tribal consultation policy. I am proud, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, that EPA was one of the first federal agencies to actually adopt our own tribal consultation policy. Through this effort, we have constantly looked at ways to strengthen and provide meaningful consultation. We just completed, in fact, consultation on our policy, holding 2 national webinars with tribal nations, and we are now in the process of identifying opportunities to strengthen it to provide meaningful consultation. As I also mentioned in my opening remarks, one of the important aspects for tribal nations is the respect and honor of their tribal treaty rights and their tribal resources. I am proud to say that EPA's consultation policy was also the first in the nation to recognize tribal treaty rights and tribal resources.
Okay. I don't think you mentioned informed consent, but let me just ask, do you think that the federal government should move to an informed consent policy with tribal nations instead of tribal consultation?
The informed consent policy, I know, has been considered by some states, and I know it is also being considered at the United Nations. President Biden has also reconvened the White House Council for Native American Affairs. And in that council, he has established for the first time an International Indigenous Issues Committee, and that committee will be looking at the UN Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous People, UNEDRIP, which will include a discussion of informed consent.
Good, thank you. A question, if I could, for Ms. Castillo. You come to this appointment, to this nomination, with quite a broad work history, from being the National Director of the Minority Business Development Agency at the U.S. Department of Commerce to CEO of the YWCA. And based on your experience, both in the federal government and in the private sector, what strengths will you bring to the ETA, especially given that experience?
Thank you, Senator Carper. As I mentioned,
I love it when witnesses say, thank you for that question. I always, by the end of a testimony, or by the end of a hearing, when they say that, I say, you're welcome. So.
Well, I bring over 20 years of experience in the legislative, policy, and programmatic arena. I also bring the experience of having worked at Commerce prior to being nominated for this position, as well as the work that I've done going into communities and really working with stakeholders and partners. I have a great passion for data. Making sure that we transform organizations into more data-driven, being able to collect and analyze and report, as well as leading large organizations in terms of transformational change. As you well pointed out previously, EDA is in a unique position to really scale and to make sure that it has not only operational excellence, but in terms of reaching communities and unleashing innovative processes, as well as innovation and technology, as well as preparing the workforce for tomorrow. So I think that I bring not only the skills and the experience, but also the passion. I love our country. I have worked for it, and right now it needs our help. And EDA is at that very unique point to be that catalytic agency to create economic opportunity and jobs.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be part of the EDA, and I'm happy that you might have that chance. We'll see. Mr. Prieto, another question, if I could, for you, dealing with civil rights at EPA. Title VI, I think it's Title VI of the Civil Rights Act prohibits recipients of federal financial assistance from discriminating on the basis of race, basis of color, national origin, when implementing programs and activities. However, in recent years, EPA's enforcement of civil rights has been, in the view of a lot of us, woefully inadequate. I think it was a 2016 report by the U.S. Civil Rights Commission found that low-income and minority communities lack, this is a quote from their opinion, lack the political and financial clout to properly bargain with polluters when fighting a siting decision or seeking redress from pollution already in their community. That's a quote. And my question would be, what will you do, what could you do to rehabilitate civil rights enforcement at EPA?
Thank you, Senator, and I would answer that in two parts. As you indicated, as it relates to Title VI, there is an Office of Civil Rights within the EPA. And I can commit to you, Senator, if confirmed, that we would work closely with that particular office. They have responsibilities over the Title VI matters and also protecting the rights of EPA employees. And while that's not part of the Office of General Counsel, again, it's an important role, and I would look forward to working very closely with that office in support to ensure that those particular matters are addressed. And as it relates, Senator, in terms of settlements where OGC is involved, again, under the executive order that I have experienced as it deals with environmental justice 12898, basically from the Department of Justice and EPA standpoint, really look to meaningful settlements and meaningful mitigations, and that included involving those communities that are directly impacted to have a voice in many of those settlements. And I do think that that is the responsibility, and that is something that we can continue to improve upon so that the communities that are actually affected by the pollution have a meaningful say in what those settlements and injunctive relief would actually result in.
All right.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Mr. Ross. The next question will be for you, Ms. Nishida. But let me just note the series of votes has begun on the Senate floor, and we're about halfway through our first vote, and we're probably wrapping up here in about 5 or 6 minutes. So if you can hang in there with us for 5 or 6 more minutes, then we'll adjourn. Ms. Nishida, while tribal consultation is extremely important, as you know, providing tribes and tribal communities with additional resources such as technical assistance is also vital to ensure that these communities have the tools necessary to be successful. And with that having been said, then my question would be this. Beyond tribal consultation and technical assistance, what other activities or engagements can the EPA be conducting to aid tribes and tribal communities?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. Beyond tribal consultation and technical
assistance, yeah.
Technical assistance, EPA has a number of avenues in which to support tribal governments. The one that I mentioned earlier to Senator Sullivan is the program that my office manages, which is the Indian General Assistance Program that provides resources to tribal governments and to tribal nations so that they can build their capacity to manage their own environmental programs. In addition, when they are ready, we have a program at EPA called Treatment as a State or Treatment as a Sovereign, so that when the tribal governments request to have delegation of EPA programs, we will review that. And again, just as we would with a state government, we will delegate program responsibility to a sovereign nation and a tribal nation. In addition, we have responsibilities, what we call direct implementation, where EPA will take responsibility for ensuring the environmental protection and public health of a tribal nation. So through our direct implementation responsibilities, we work very closely not only with our regional offices, but with the various program offices at EPA to ensure that protection in Indian country is as great as it is throughout the rest of the United States. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. I think the last question I'm going to ask is more of a personal nature, and I'm going to direct this to Mr. Prieto. I've mentioned, and it's mentioned a couple of times, your family service, extraordinary military service. Would you just take the last minute or two and just share with us a little bit about that service and sacrifice?
Well, thank you, Senator, and thank you on behalf of my family. As I did share with you, the VFW post in Santa Paula, California is named the Mercer Prieto, named after the Mercer family and the Prieto family. I did have 3 uncles that were killed during World War II. One was a test pilot for P-38s, one was a Marine in Bougainville, and one was a paratrooper on the second day of D-Day who was dropped behind the lines. I also have, 2 living cousins in terms of service, one who received the Distinguished Flying Cross for his service in Vietnam, and another who was part of Special Forces in Afghanistan during the early parts of that. And I say that to say, Senator, that my family inspires me. I cannot match their service. One of my cousins, one that I just mentioned, sent me a note and said that he was proud of me, and I said, you inspire me. Nothing compares to their service. And so I would just thank you for that opportunity, Senator, to say that. And again, I'm very proud of my family, the service to this country, the love of this country. And again, I'm just an extension of their sacrifice, and I do my very small part in terms of my public service. But I am truly honored that you allowed me that opportunity.
No, when we had that conversation, I was just struck. I'm the last Vietnam veteran serving in the U.S. Senate with the death of John McCain. And my grandmother is a Gold Star mother. Her 19-year-old son died in a kamikaze attack on his aircraft carrier in the Western Pacific in 1944. So we know something about sacrifice and service. And I would say that one of the responsibilities that those of us who are privileged to serve here have is by our service to give honor to those who have really sacrificed for this country. So thank you for doing that. I am going to give a short closing statement, and then we'll do a little bit of a final housekeeping. Again, thank you all for joining us today. It's been wonderful to have a chance to get to know you a little bit before the hearing, and even better to see you right here face to face. And in some cases, to see your mom or a niece or a nephew, and to connect with others in a more distant way. But for those who have tuned in and have taken in this hearing, usually we have more members who show up for hearings. And the fact that we have actually fewer members showing up is actually a good thing, because it means there's not a lot of controversy surrounding your nominations, and which should shorten the amount of time it takes to get you your nomination up for a vote on the floor and to have you confirmed. So it's a good thing. But we appreciate very much your previous service, and we appreciate very much your willingness to serve in these important roles. And we thank you for your testimony today before our committee. I have make, I think, some final housekeeping announcements, and then we're going to close her down. But I would like, I'd love to make unanimous consent requests when there's no other Senate here, so I can just ask for anything. But I won't do that. But I would like to ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a variety of materials that include letters from stakeholders and other materials that relate to today's nomination hearing, and hearing no objection. Senators will be allowed to submit questions for the record through the close of business on this coming Friday, June the 18th. We'll compile those questions. We'll send them to our witnesses and ask our witnesses to reply by 9 a.m. the next morning. No, that's not true. We'll ask you to reply by Wednesday, June 23rd. What is it, by close of business? Yeah, by close of business on Wednesday, June 23rd. So it should be a long weekend for you. And with that, I don't see anybody else showing up. So do we have anybody else remotely? No, we don't. So it's great to see you all. Thank you again for being with us. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.